Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I don't think I've spoken for over a year now on this community, so it's always good to be back and talk about things that are interesting me at the moment. So why the title? When the business moves faster than BI. So I kind of suspect a lot of you've been in this situation when things are going along fine. All your dashboards are running, reports are going out, and then something changes in the business, and suddenly, BI is in the spotlight in a way it really wasn't ready for. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. It's not really the technology, but the gap between what the business needs and what BI can actually deliver. And more importantly, what you can do about it before that gap becomes a crisis. So my name's Neil Strange. I'm the CEO of Business Thinking. We are sponsors of this data community. If you want to be in touch with me, that's my email address. You can check out our website as well if you want to. But in relation to today's talk, I'll sort of give you a bit of a context where I'm coming from on this. So a lot of the work we do as a company is with businesses that are going through the sort of change we're going to talk about today. And one scenario we see particularly often is where we have an investor-backed business. So we've got private equity or growth equity coming in, and there's been an injection of money and the clock's now running. When you're in this situation, or the management team, they're not just dealing with normal business pressure, they're dealing with investors who've got a very specific return expectation and often quite a short time frame to achieve it. So urgency for action isn't really coming from the market or a competitor. It's coming from the investment itself. So spend money, move fast, and deliver results. We're often called in to these organisations because really time and time again, the BI team's not simply set up for working at the pace that the investor needs. So it was built for a steadier business, and suddenly it's being asked to support decisions that need to happen rapidly, not in the timeframes that they're used to. That's really the origin of this presentation, and I think a lot of what we'll cover today will resonate with you if you've worked in or around that kind of environment. Framing really for today is but BI is quietly powering the decisions that run the business, and most of the time nobody really thinks about it. It sort of just happens. So reports go out, dashboards refresh, all the numbers get used in meetings. But there's a kind of hidden assumption baked into all of that. It assumes that the business stays roughly the same shape. So the same questions, same metrics, same pace. And when that changes, and it can happen quite fast, BI's got to either step up or it becomes a problem. So what can trigger these sorts of things? Well, it's a business event, of course. These are significant events. So we're talking about mergers and crisis of performances, leadership changes. So I'm sure many of you have worked in somewhere where that's been through one of these in the last few years. And these aren't edge cases. They're fairly routine. So over 5 or 10 year period in most organizations, something like this will happen. And the one I wanted to look at today is leadership change, because it's the one that creates a lot of immediate pressure on BI, and often underestimated the impact that can have. So we have a new leader arriving. So we've got a CEO, coup, or new managing director arrives. And they've been brought in with a clear mandate. So, maybe the business has been underperforming, or there's been a merger, or maybe the previous leaders retired. And they've probably been through a careful selection process, and there's some expectations on them to make an impact on the organization. So, of course, before they arrive, they get full of energy, they're coming in with ideas. But critically, they've got a very short window to prove that they were the right choice for the people who chose them to take that role on. What is it about new leaders then, related to BI? Well, in the first few weeks, they're not really going to be making big decisions. So they're going to be listening, They're going to be having one-to-ones. They're going to be sitting in on meetings or reading reports. And all the time, they're kind of forming opinions. And so they're asking themselves, really, does this business really know what's going on? Do the numbers make sense? Can I trust what people are telling me? Or do the teams have a shared view of reality? So where did the 90-day idea come from? Some people talking about it being the first 100 days, the first 3 months, the first whatever. But there was a book written all back in the 1990s by Michael Watkins. And his book he published is pretty much the standard playbook for executive onboarding. So the idea is that in the first 3 or 4 months sets the tone for everything that follows in their time in the seat. So today we're not really going to go into the book, but the framework inside the book's quite useful because I'm going to use that as a structure for thinking about when and how the BI service gets tested. So I guess the first question is, how long is 90 days? So depends whether you count it weekends included or not. I don't. So it's around about 18 weeks or so in there. And that basically gives the leader about 4 months to show a direction and early evidence of impact. So they've got to make a visible impact. Of course, they're not going to deliver a full transformation in that period, but it gives an idea of the direction they're heading in. If you think about it from a BI perspective, so if a new leader arrives and they want something built, so maybe they want a new version of customer profitability, for example, or a performance model produced, how long does it actually go from the request for this information to trusted usable output? It's quite a compressed time frame to work within. And over that time frame, KPIs, which tend to be lagging indicators, it's very difficult sometimes to get a sort of the cascade of impact of a change through into a meaningful movement in a KPI. So the leader's going to be looking around for where the quick wins are, where they can make an impact. And they haven't got long. They basically got to learn quickly, find out the real priorities, and really start visible action well before that day 90. So the start of the journey, after the 90 days, the sponsors will start looking for signs that they chose the right person. So they'll be looking for measures coming through that support the strategy of the leader coming in. So it's a really compressed time period to do something in, and BI is definitely going to become part of the picture because you can see here new measures and new KPIs will come out requiring measurement. The 90-day framework. So basically, it's broken into 3 steps. So diagnosis, relationship, and action. So the first 5 weeks are really about the leader understanding the business. So it's all about politics, about relation building. So they're not really making big structural decisions at this point, but they're learning. So they may well have arrived with some ideas, but they'll be testing those out. And then around about week 6, that starts to shift and they start making decisions, and decisions need evidence. And that's when BI gets tested properly, not because anyone's deliberately put BI under scrutiny, but because the leader is starting to ask for data to justify what they're about to do. And if you're ready for that, you look like a strategic asset. And if you're not ready for it, well, you look like a problem. So this is the problem, or the uncomfortable truth. So within those 90 days, the leader has got to form a view of whether the BI team's an asset or an obstacle to making progress. And whatever their view is in that period, that tends to stick. So, teams can take years to recover from a bad first impression with a new executive. So we've got to get it right. And the uncomfortable part really is that the judgment is often formed on things that the team's got no control over. So things that have left over from legacy, debt, technical debt, underinvestment, or data quality problems that have been there for a long time, is not the current team's fault, but you're the ones in front of the leader when it surfaces. So you need to be able to cope with that. So what happens in the first 5 weeks? So in the first month, the leader is going to pick up signals. So they're noticing whether the business has a shared view of numbers. They're checking out whether people in meetings are referencing the same figures or arguing about which version is right, and whether reports arrive on time is important, or whether they're late, or if the data just tells a story or is just produces tables of data. On this slide, which I think really captures why this is hard. So we've got two different worlds in a way. We've got the business world, which is thinking about all the strategy and efficiency and transformation and compliance that needs to be addressed in the organization. But the BI world is locked in a more technical data area, thinking about ETL performance and star schema designs and data drift and report queues. So neither of these worlds is wrong, but they're not really talking the same language. And the risk is that when the business needs something new, something fast and strategic, BI is still in service desk mode, and there's a disconnect there in terms of meeting needs of the users. So I'll give you a real example. Imagine there's a new sales director arrives and asks a pretty simple question: which of our customers are growing revenue but actually becoming less profitable once you factor in service costs? So that's not really a complicated question conceptually, but if your data's siloed between finance and operations and CRM, and if your cost allocation is done in a spreadsheet somewhere, if there's no agreed definition of profitability, you're not going to be answering that question in a week. And the new sales director, by the time he gets the data, has already moved on to other topics. You need to be in a position to respond to these new demands. We talked about acting from week 6, but that's week 6 is roughly where the shift happens. But up to that point, there's been 25 days of listening and learning. So at the point of making the actions happen, they start making calls. So who are they going to restructure? Which markets are going to exit? Where to invest? On which customers do we prioritize? And every one of these decisions needs data. And this is the moment the BI service gets properly stress tested. So not in the formal evaluation, it's just in the sort of daily running of trying to answer the questions coming out of the exec team. And they're going to arrive pretty fast, and they're going to be fairly detailed in the nature of those. So we'll be basically asking, can we answer these questions? How quickly? How confidently? And are the numbers going to hold up when someone challenges them in a board meeting? I don't know if you ever sat in a board meeting when an executive makes an announcement based on data, and then they're taken apart by other board members questioning the data, and they're unable to answer the questions being asked, and therefore have to take away actions to table and bring back answers to the next meeting. It spoils momentum, and it can also affect the credibility of the executive. So they need robust, accurate data to work with. And when the leader gets into making decisions, they need to create conditions for action. So leader's fine, they can set a direction, but they don't actually make the change happen. They're going to rely on the whole company to change. They're going to need others to act. And if you're going to encourage someone to change, you have to work on the change management aspects of that. So you need to have consent, manage perception of individuals, and show why the change is necessary, which means it, of course, needs evidence. So where is value being lost? Where are decisions blocked? And where is action needed? And that evidence there turns that plan into a shared business case and gets that buy-in you need to make that happen. So just think about it. The last time you saw a significant organizational change in your organization, so whether it succeeded or failed, often came down to whether there was credible evidence behind it. So it's not just the leader's instinct. Numbers are needed, customer data is needed, performance data is needed, financial impacts needed. That's what BI produces. So when BI is working well, it will give the leader the ammunition to build consent and to challenge that status quo and to show the management team why action's needed. So without that, the leader's just asking people to trust in their judgment, which is obviously a much harder sell. So what does moving faster mean? The BI team needs to move faster? This is what I mean in practice. So the leader's asking different sorts of questions. They're not asking for a customer revenue report. They're interested in questions like this, like which customers are growing revenue but becoming less profitable. Or, if we prioritize the top customers, what does that impact on our P&L? So these aren't outrageous questions. Decent commercial leaders would want to know these things, particularly if they're trying to work out actions to, improve the performance of the organization. But look at what these require. So we're going to be joining here together multiple data domains. So sales, operations, finance, HR as well. And they're going to use definitions that probably aren't consistently agreed across the business. And these need to be answered fast, not in 3 weeks. So what we're going to see really here is a kind of mismatch. It's structural. So the business has evolved to expect self-service and fast exploration, but the BI reports coming out is like a request queue. So standard reports coming out, and it's up to the business then to take the standard data that BI produces and do this analysis in spreadsheet form. We all know where that leads. If people are doing joining of data sets together and trying to infer calculations in here to get answers out. So the BI function needs to step up here and do something. What do I mean by structural issues? These structural issues haven't appeared overnight. They're in the accumulated results, really, of years of underinvestment. So there's been growing technical debt in there, possibly building of multiple data pipelines, and BI really evolving into a reporting factory rather than a decision support function. What I'll do is I'll walk through some of these most common structural issues now, because I suspect that you recognize most of them in there. So let's look at the first one. So factory reporting. So I've already mentioned this. Traditional BI has scheduled reports coming out, often going into dashboards, and they're fantastic at answering the same question reliably every month. And that's fine for people who are managing budgets, who are managing towards certain targets, who want to see these KPIs coming out week by week, month by month, to compare the direction of travel in there. So we get things out like sales by region, margin by product, revenue versus budget. So they're genuinely valuable. But the moment someone asks a question that combines data in a new way, so one that wasn't pre-built into the reports, the service slows down dramatically. So the request goes into a queue, someone has to spec it, build it, test it, and by the time a report comes out, the moment's often passed and the management have moved on and made a gut decision or a very rough decision on the back of an envelope, trying to work out the right way to go here. So that's the first issue. So far too much organized into factory reporting and less into sort of ad hoc analysis. I call this next one the battered spreadsheet. We've all seen this. We have organizations that are really spreadsheet factories. So the warehouse is used as a source. It extracts data, but it comes out as a table of data, which someone then loads into a spreadsheet. And then before you know it, they've copied that spreadsheet, sent it to someone else, or even worse, someone's developed another spreadsheet that feeds off of that, and then another spreadsheet that feeds off of both of them. And there's a whole chain of spreadsheets produced to produce an end analysis and report. And then someone has a bright idea that they'll write macros in there to automate the process. It's not documented. Then someone leaves the organization and you're left with a bit of a mess of ungoverned data flows that no one knows how they were written, how they were produced, and then management require a change, and suddenly you're looking at a problem. So basically, as we all know, lots of spreadsheets is not a good thing. Part of the side effect of lots of spreadsheets is that we end up with data being untraceable. You get to a spreadsheet with a final number in it, which goes up to senior management, and someone asks the question, why is that number the way that is? You may have expected sales volumes in there, and one number's lower for a particular period, and the sales director says that can't be right. Where did that number come from? So you go back to the team and say, can you please give me a trace back of that number? Where did it come from? Is it correct? And before you know it, there's umpteen spreadsheets open on the desktop. You're tracing back. Some of these spreadsheets belong to other people, so you have to go to them to get their answer. And it can take days, sometimes weeks even, to trace the numbers back. And very often you find in some of these sheets that someone's been doing some data cleaning. So some rules are in there that often appear quite odd and you're not quite sure why they're in there. And no one's around to explain why those numbers were changed in the particular way they were. And then you're essentially going back to management after a short while and saying, well, I can't trace it back. I can't actually give you the lineage and explain all the steps involved to get from the raw data up to the final number, which doesn't really give the management any confidence that any number's right at all, which is a bit damaging. Then, of course, we have reconciliation wars. So I'm sure you've all seen this. Finance reports revenue of some value, sales reports another value, operations has a third number, and they're all technically correct. They're just measuring different things at different points in the process. But nobody told anyone, so the executive team spends an hour in a meeting arguing about which number's right, instead of deciding what to do about it. And this just weakens their credibility of the numbers. Data quality. Now, data quality really isn't the BI team's responsibility, but data can come in with all kinds of weird stuff in it that you wouldn't expect. So we get things like people cutting and pasting Microsoft Word text in and bringing in control characters unknowingly. I've had one client where someone was nearly 1,000 years old because they lost the first number off the year date and no one spotted. I've had places where ages were in the negative ranges. I've had people have had goods shipped to addresses where the address isn't in the database. All kinds of things going on. I'm sure you've seen all this as well. But bad data, as you know, is a silent killer. It doesn't really announce itself, it's just there. And it throws out all kinds of edge cases that can really damage the business rules that you're working on and can result in quite a bit of extra code being written to work their way around it. Also, bad data quality can affect the quality of AI results that you get as well. And the really dangerous thing is if the business doesn't know that the data quality is bad and BI has been fixing it for them on the quiet. So they think all the numbers are right. They're making decisions on them. And of course, they're not right. So decisions are being made on bad data. Then we have inconsistent keys. We've all seen this. Different systems have their own local key for a particular business object or business concept. So here we have customer. Customer is in 3 separate systems. The name of them slightly different. The address is largely the same, but there can be some differences in there. And they've got 3 separate IDs. How do we join them together? Have we got duplicates in there? Are they genuine duplicates or not? This sort of integration is really at the core of what BI does, trying to merge data together from these different systems. Now, often you're lucky in that some of the codes are carried over from one system to the other as part of the data transfer. But in many clients I work in, there's at least one data set, one data area where there is no consistency. So, for example, here, if I was asked to say how many customers do we have, this could be one customer, two or three customers. And in fact, to be precise, if we can't reconcile them, then we have three customers where in reality we have only one. So you're going to be way out on your numbers and counting there. Now, the thing about this is the business says this is an IT problem, but reality is it is a governance issue which the business needs to help resolve. Ownership. Here we have basically someone who has an issue and no one's taking ownership of resolving that. So customer coming in, making a service request saying, I think my data's incorrect, and goes to customer service, and there's no one in the organization who's got clarity over who will action that and clear up that data item. Now that means that we will have things not done because no one steps up to run it or to fix something, or we have two or three people who provide patchy service, they fix things when they feel like it, or we have several fixing things and correcting each other and causing waste in there as well. So this isn't an answer to data quality fixes. It's a route to chaos and inconsistency. Aging tools. I have seen a few architectures that look like that, more like a knitting pattern than anything else. And these happen because of often very fast responsive work in there. The older tools in the stack, they can still turn that handle for your regular reporting, but they weren't built for running modern engineering, agile ways of working. So a lot of tools lack things like lineage or automated testing or version control. So every change you make to an architecture like this becomes risky. So you fix one thing and break three others. So the team becomes extremely conservative about making changes, which slows the service down even more. Then we have limited capacity. I think it's more common for me to see an understaffed BI team than an overstaffed one. Occasionally I do bump into them. I did bump into one which had 250 engineers in the BI team, but most of the time there's just a handful of people in there, 3 people, 6 people, something like that, just enough to keep the service running. So they're all doing everything. So they're covering for each other. They're sort of managing the legacy reporting, responding to urgent fixes when they happen, restarting failed jobs, and basically just coping with the sort of ad hoc demand that's coming in all the time. So you end up with like a stretched reactive service in there, which really doesn't have that capacity to improve how things are. So problems really never get fixed, they just get managed. And then finally, the business itself. In some organizations, they kind of get the data and they have a very clear idea of what they want from data and how they'd like it presented to them and how that data is going to deliver value in the business. Many other organizations are really imagining data only in the form of spreadsheets. So all they want from BI is a table of data that's accurate, and they then go away and work on that. So when they don't understand what the data can do, they're really asking for the lowest value things. So it dumps all the analytical work back onto people who may or may not be doing it consistently, and BI never gets to do the higher value analytical work that it could be doing. Okay, I'm sure you're all aware of these things. It's a bit of a damning indictment of the state of many organizations' BI teams. But really, the root cause of this is an underinvestment. The BI service was built for a different era. It was built to serve yesterday's needs at yesterday's pace. And without sustained investment in modernising, it's essentially calcified. It's gone down a dead end. and really shouldn't keep going down that path. The answer really isn't to push the team harder, it's really to make a deliberate choice about the path forward. So thinking about modernising and building capability in there. That really comes back then to who's to blame. So if you don't address these things, then all this stuff that's going on in the background, when that new leader gets to decide about the performance of the team, then you're going to be blamed for things outside your control, for all these constraints that it didn't create. So the leader will need something quickly, you can't get it, and forms a view that BI is a blocker. But the reason the BI can't deliver is because the team isn't trying. It's because of years of decisions or non-decisions that preceded them that forced them into a service pattern that they have. So the usual response from the business for that then is to put more pressure on the team for output. So they want more reports, faster turnaround. But that's exactly the wrong intervention, and it makes the structural problem worse. So we really need to be looking at the causes of the issues in here, not the symptoms. We want to avoid this reputational issue, being slow and unresponsive, and we want to move across to a happier world where the BI team is supporting the business. So there's two things worth naming here. First, the BI team, its own maturity really matters in this moment, because a mature team can articulate its constraints in business language and link them to what the leader's trying to achieve and suggest options. A less mature team, and if it's been underinvested in, it may well be, tends to get very technical and defensive, which makes that perception problem even worse. And the other issue we have is that BI's invisibility here is a real issue. So a new leader may genuinely not think about BI at all in their first few weeks. It looks to them like a support function, and it's in the background. The danger's really only there, and only notice it when something goes wrong. That's what this is saying here. But not addressing BI is actually a genuine risk, because if the service is built for a different pace, when the pace changes and the leader needs evidence for decisions, they can find themselves without trusted data at exactly the moment that they need it the most. From the leader's side, they've got a packed diary. They don't think about BI very much, and they might delegate it to the CIO as an IT problem, but the window for making changes to BI that would actually support that action phrase is very short. So if the decision to change something in BI comes too late, then the 90 days is already over, and the data needs are not there. So the leader will be making gut feel decisions based on their opinion rather than the facts. How do we get around this? I think the practical advice really for the BI team is don't wait to be asked. If you're in charge of the BI team or you're advising one of them, so the move really is to prepare a very short, honest briefing before the new leader asks for something that can't be delivered. So not a long deck. We're not doing a technical audit. So I'm not interested in things like, the how big the database is and how many queries are run and what the response times are and the job failure rates. And we're not interested in those. We're interested in here the business areas we can support, not the technical part. And then really what that's saying is it's a clear document that says, here's what we do well, here's where we're vulnerable, and here's what it would take to improve our responsiveness in the next 90 days. So we'll be producing a briefing with these sorts of headings. So what do we do well today? Where are we stable? Where do we do manual work, or where is there key person dependencies, and so on. These are things that a leader would appreciate because they explain clearly the capability of the team and also where things could be improved for delivery of results inside that first 90 days. Timing's important on this as well, because if you surface the constraints early, you can frame them as risks to the transformation agenda, so things that need investment to address If you start surfacing these after the leader's already frustrated because they couldn't get an answer, then it sounds like excuses. So same information, completely different reception depending on when you share it. The answer then is a joint moving forward. It's not a BI team to fix itself. The leader's job is to tell the BI team where the priorities are, to sort of assess that maturity of the BI team and to create trust in the direction of the way where we're going, and then decide what support's needed for that team and to fund it as well. In return, the BI team really should be explaining their current capabilities, exposing their constraints and proposing options, and have a roadmap for improvement that they are committed to. And if necessary, additional support might be needed in there to accelerate the delivery, particularly if there's capacity or capability missing from the BI team itself. What does this mean in terms of how we're going to be working? Agile, of course, agile ways of working. I'm aware of there's been a backlash over time on being too strictly agile in environments. Businesses still expect things back for the money that they're spending on new systems, but actually there's a lot of value in things like rapid delivery, time box delivery, picking a size of what's being delivered in iterations, testing, automated testing, and all that sort of thing. A lot of this can be applied to the BI development process if you're smart at how you approach things and use the modern tooling in here. Really, what we need to be looking at here is where's the value to be delivered, and the leader, of course, will be running up to making decisions about actions. And if they're looking at trying to make a move in the first 90 days, a noticeable impact, then they will be focusing down on, for them, would be the sort of lowest hanging fruit. So it'll be typically a big focus down on one or two initiatives. And if the BI team is aware of those initiatives, they can start to develop information around just those areas to help support the leader in the work that they're doing. We have right sizing, very important. We want to be able to deliver rapidly. We want to be able to deliver consistently. So again, with the newer techniques there, it's possible to pick a project size that's deliverable in a matter of weeks, from beginning to end through the whole stack, and then to build just a thin slice of the functionality out, and then over time add more thin slices to improve the range of data and analytics that's possible in there, and gradually build out the whole picture of data for the organization. And don't forget, they'll still be running the old BI system in parallel, so there will still be data coming out there as standard reports that cover off areas as well. And AI. Can't have a presentation now without talking about AI, but it's very relevant here. But I want to try and give you a more realistic view rather than a hype view. So I'll talk you through what my teams use at the moment for AI, and it's got use all along the development process. So first thing is it can accelerate your discovery and understanding, help you understand unfamiliar data much faster. So you can do profiling, you can identify relationships between data tables, you can spot quality issues faster, and it can also generate some skeleton code or templates for pipelines, test cases and documentation, all the repetitive stuff really that, in here as well, all the repetitive stuff that slows teams down. Okay, so we use it for all these things already. And also on the insight side, when you've got a well-governed semantic layer underneath it all, AI can actually help users explore data in natural language, summarize changes, and explain anomalies. Which brings me to the semantic layer, because this is really the foundation that makes AI useful rather than dangerous. So a semantic layer translates your governed data into business terms. So customer, margin, service performance are all defined consistently with access controls and clear ownership. So when AI sits on top of that, it gives sensible answers. And when it doesn't, well, you can get confident sounding wrong answers. So there's a paper by Cornell University earlier this year where they showed 17 to 23% improvement in the accuracy of conclusions from an AI running against semantic data as opposed to raw data set. It just shows that it's not a small margin for improvement, and it makes it easier for AI to do inference based on the data that you have. And of course, AI is now built into a lot of tools. So, Power BI has Copilot, Tableau has Pulse, and so on. And they provide natural language access to govern data. And it's also possible now to also generate dashboards as part of an answer using an AI engine. So, it's very useful. If you give the business users access to govern data, they can reduce the backlog of dashboards that are waiting to be actioned, and then frees the BI team to focus on harder analytical work. Putting the whole plan together looks more complicated than it is. It summarizes the sort of timeline we're looking at here. Don't worry about sort of reading every element on here. The sort of message is that the leader and the BI team are running on parallel tracks from day one. So the BI prepares a readiness brief very early on, so to inform the leader of where they are. And by about week 3 or 4 in, they sort of assessed their capabilities and started looking at platform foundations. And so hopefully around about week 4, as the leaders' ideas start to form in terms of where they're going to focus, work can start on the first new data sets for the users to absorb. And then sort of by week 4, they're starting on that first thin slice use case. And the leader, meanwhile, sort of assessing and building trust. And by about week 6 to 8 is starting to act. And by then, BI has something ready to support those first interventions. We often have 2 teams running in these circumstances, often working on 6-week cycles, and one team starting as a phase out. Basically, one starts now, another one starts in 3 weeks, which means every 3 weeks there's a drop to the business of new data sets, which gives a nice cadence and rapid delivery in there. To conclude, core message is really that BI doesn't have to become a constraint on the new leaders' first 90 days, but avoiding that really requires early action before the pressure arrives. So early conversations, honest assessments, and a plan. And the teams that do this well, they don't just survive that 90-day test, they emerge from it with a stronger mandate, more investment, and a clearer seat at the table, because they've proved with evidence that BI is a strategic asset and not just a reporting factory. So first 90 days are not everything, they're the foundation for the future development of the service. But just before we conclude, we do have a scorecard, which is a short quiz that can give you an assessment as to maybe where your gaps are in your BI function, and just been released, and there's a QR code there you can use to access that. Delighted if some people would like to try that out and get feedback on it as well. Thank you very much. I hope you found that useful. A bit more of a management focus today to the presentation. Thank you.